All right, so I'm off this weekend and maybe next weekend. I do have 2 cars booked towards the end of the month, two trucks actually. But for now, we're gonna enjoy some weekends off. And try to get my car cleaned up. So I did my wife's car last week. Get the Macan some attention. But this is it's a 21 Macan GTS. The color is called Chalk. This car has 22,000 miles on it now. I bought it with 10. I've really been liking this pole a lot. Right, this is a Microfiber Madness pole with their newer wash mitt. So this is removable. I pull it off each time. Works really well. I blew the car off. Now we're just going to use, this is Geon Quick Detailer. A couple sprays. Doesn't take a lot. And then would just finish drying the car. The blower gets off, especially on a coated car, the bulk of the water in a couple minutes. And then this just finished drying. But this car has infinite and top coat, PPF on headlights, bumpers, fenders, and mirrors. I didn't do the hood on this because of the clamshell. It needs a 72-inch width roll, and I'd have to buy a whole 72-inch roll, which I don't really need. Let's see, this car, so it's a 21. I bought it towards the end of 22. It had 10,000 miles. The car was 82 grand plus tax, title, fees, and stuff. I think I was like 86 or 85 out the door. I traded in, I had a 2018 S4, the Audi S4, that had like 39,000, almost 40,000 miles on it. The car was paid off. I got 40 grand for the trade. I put $15,000 down on this, and I financed like just under 30. Pretty identical economics to the iX. It's the same story. Like, I don't like big payments. So, so I financed under 30 for 5 years. I don't remember what the rates were in 22, but it was about a $500 payment. I paid that off in like a year and a half. So, was it 22, 20? Yeah, maybe towards the end of 23, maybe 24. But this car's been paid off for at least a year now. Can't remember the exact dates. But that's the thing, right? So I try not to finance a ton, and then I just accelerate the prepayments on it just to get rid of that debt. But, I think it's pretty safe to say the car washing money paid for this car. It paid for the Audi, I know that. So that's kind of my motivation for washing cars, for working, the side hustle. I wanted something to show for it. So you buy a depreciating asset, right? This thing's worth under 50 now, wholesale. And I've only put, it's got 22,000 miles now, so, like 4,000 miles a year. Because I stopped going into the office like July of 20. So right in the heart of COVID, they told us to work from home. I was driving to South Park every day. We had a satellite office there with 3 of us. So it was me, the treasurer, and then my colleague when I was in capital markets. So this car it doesn't get driven. I go to the bus stop across the street. I'll run around town with it. But, we've put 12,000 miles on the iX since December. My wife does go to the office twice a week, sometimes 3 days, and that's the car we run around town in. All right, so this is a big clamshell, right? It covers the headlights, essentially the front fenders in it. So it needs a 72-inch roll, otherwise you're stretching the hell out of the film. But this engine is, it's kind of the main reason I wanted this car. So this is it's the 2.9 liter twin turbo. And at the time I was looking at, like, RS5s is what I really wanted. I wanted the Ascari Launch Edition. It was a pretty rare edition. They only did it 1 year in 21. There were only 3,000 units that were brought to the States. So ever since then, I've been kind drooling over these Ascari blue RS5s because Audi brought the color back in 23. So in 23, 24, actually 25, you can still get the Ascari. It's not the launch edition, but they introduced the competition pack in 23. It's like a $10,000 package, but it comes with adjustable height coilovers, gangster split 5 polished wheels, some carbon bits around, a beautiful spec. So I've been looking at those as a replacement for this guy. Now that RS5 with a competition pack, it stickers at like 95, 98 grand, depending on options. But you can get used ones, right? So right now there's a 24 used Ascari, the perfect spec. I think it has like 10,000 miles, maybe 12,000 miles, but they want 75 for it. I'm not trying to do anything, in the near future anyways. I need to pay off the iX. I did 2 payments on that thing this week, so that balance is $17,900. So I probably got a year on that, unless I really accelerate prepays. But I'm just trying to do 2 payments, sometimes a third if I can, make it happen. Now, from like a car salesman perspective, they don't like that, right? They want to sell you on payment. So it's like, oh, it's only, X amount per month more to, get this or get that. And I don't care about the payment. I care about the balance. I think that's my whole gripe with leasing, like especially with the iX. I mean, I talked to a lot of dealers and all of them were just pressing the lease. They're like, you got to lease this car. You can lease it for $900 a month. And then, you just get a new one in a couple years. But it's like, I don't want that obligation. I don't want, I'm going to burn 40 grand on the lease payments. And then at the end of it, I have nothing, absolutely nothing. And I'm tied to your timeline. Like I have to take action on your timeline. So, like with this, I got 22,000 miles. I own it outright. I don't have to sell it. I'm just looking at cars because I'm bored. Like, yes, it's down, 30 grand in value, but that's normal for these cars. I mean, they lose 10 grand a year if you drive them or not. So it's like if you're not comfortable with that depreciation, then you gotta buy a cheaper car. There's no, or you run the risk of being flipped on it, which is, a bigger problem. I don't know. I'm pretty conservative with, buying cars. Like I know this thing was 80 grand. This was the most I've ever spent on a car. I kind of justified that because of COVID. When I bought this at late 22, used car prices were still high. Like I got 40 grand for a 2018 S4 that I bought new for like 58. Right, so the S4 was overvalued. This thing was overvalued. So I only cared about the net. I think real money on this car, is probably, especially on the S4, it was probably like 10 grand. Both these cars were 10 grand inflated. If we would have been in more like normal times. Let's see. So today is October 4th. So I did get my first statement from the first hedge fund. Okay, so this was a worse month than the prior. So my net return for the month was 3%. Right, so it's at 36% annualized. But the good news for me is my balance is now over 30 grand. So that's a good number. I did check. So I've been in this since May, and my cumulative return in this fund is at like 20%. Now, I checked, and the S&P 500 is also at, about 20% since May, right? So April lows was the big tariff bottom, and then since then markets have done nothing but gone up. So, I'm pacing the SPY, which is fine, Obviously, I'm taking extra risk with this. I'm paying more fees, so I'd want to be north of the SPY, but whatever. And then the second fund is more delayed, so I won't get a statement until like the 10th or 12th. So it'll be interesting to see how the two funds' performance compares. Okay, this is Geon Ceramic Detailer. I'm just going to wipe down the wheels. So this car is pretty stock. I've lowered it, so it's about 2 inches down. It is on air suspension, so I used lowering links, which basically just trick the computer to think the car is higher than what it really is, so it brings it down. Those are dumb cheap. I think it was like 150 bucks. These are aftermarket wheels. These are 21-inch HRE replicas, right? So HRE, this is a 522M brushed gold wheel. If these were real HRE wheels, they would be like, I don't know, probably $9,000 for the set. I paid 3,400 bucks. I did get new tires. These are Michelin AS4s, the all-season sports. I don't know, 1,500 bucks. So wheel and tires, I'm in, $5,000-ish, which is very cheap for full forged wheels. Very similar price to like BC Forged. I had those on the S4. I think those are a really good wheel for the money. I'd buy a set of those again in a heartbeat. I did get a couple questions offline following the last video. Maybe I can talk about. In the last video, I just kind of rambled about, what we're trying to do to retire in, 10 years. As far as early retirement, bridge income, all that. And one of the questions I got was, how that is impacting like the traditional retirement plan. And for us, it's not. We still follow the waterfall method, whereas my wife and I each max our 401ks, then we max the backdoor Roth, and then the HSA accounts. I save my HSA, my wife spends hers, so I guess that doesn't really count, but and then post that is where it's all taxable brokerage accounts. Same thing with equity. Like I get equity from my company. I can't touch that until retirement age as well. So all this stuff is going to be sitting there. The only downside with this product is you have to wipe it fully. Like it won't flash off. It'll just streak. Who's that? Other thing I was looking at this week was just our mortgage balance. Like I was looking at the amortization schedule to see, when this thing's going to be paid off, because that's a big ticket item that I would like to have gone when we get to the point, mainly because of the cost of health insurance. So we built this house in 2016. We closed August of 2016. We moved down from Maryland. We had a townhouse in Maryland, and then we moved here. It took, 4 months to build this house. It's just a spec home, right? A big box commercial builder house. But we bought in 2016, and then, right when COVID was starting, my wife had this idea of, she wanted a farmhouse. It was super trendy at the time, these modern farmhouses, these big white contraptions. And I was like, whatever, do your research, let's figure it out. One of my motivators for moving was just the school district. We're not really in a good school district. So because of that, my daughter goes to a charter school, 10 miles north of here. Fortunately, that's working out great. If it wasn't, I don't have a good plan B. I don't like the private schools around us. There's more private schools closer in the Charlotte, but the logistics of that is tough. Some of our neighbors do it. A couple of them have nannies that pick up and drop off the kids, but I don't know how that would look. So fortunately, the school thing is working out. But in any event, so it was 2020, COVID, you're stuck at home. My wife's window shopping for houses. A modern farmhouse in Charlotte, the big builders don't do it, so you got to go custom. So we ended up buying a 2-acre lot in South Carolina, like 10 miles into South Carolina from us. A gorgeous lot. It was in a small custom home neighborhood. There's like 40 houses. So we bought the lot. We spent the next 9 months dorking around with builders, drafters, and architects. And if you recall what happened during those times, right, rates were plummeting. Rates were dumb cheap, but lumber started going up, and all material prices were skyrocketing. So all these prices are going through the roof. They're changing daily. Our builder couldn't give us good numbers on what it would cost, right? I financed the lot. I was going to flip it into a construction loan. It was all through a credit union locally. So I had that timeline set out, but, we had a fixed budget for this house, and I wasn't prepared or I didn't want to go beyond that. And then the thing with these custom builds were what these builders were telling us. They're like, you need to plan for like a 20% overage. And I'm like, a 20% overage? I'm like, it's $1 million house. So you're asking me to plan for an extra $200,000 swing. And I was like, no, this is crazy talk. So ultimately, I just wasn't comfortable with what the prices were doing. I was scared that we would overbuild for the neighborhood. Probably not so much, but it definitely would have been one of the, higher cost houses. And more importantly, we would have like no equity. You're giving up all your equity because you're paying at market rate for the thing. So you're building a new house, market rate, plus it would have been a smaller house. We would have lost about 1,000 square foot. So we're at 4,300 square foot now. The floor plans and stuff we were speccing with the builder, just given the cost per foot, were around like 33, 35. So we ended up selling the lot like a year and a half later. We made 30% on the sale. I thought that was cool. Forget the house. I'm just going to refi this house and we're going to stay put. So I refied into a 20-year 2.5% mortgage. A beautiful 2.5%. Now we've been prepaying on it. So we did it in 21. So the final maturity is in 2041. We've been prepaying. Right now it stands at 2038. I need to get that to 2035. Right, that's our 10-year plan. And it's been a while since I looked at the amortization schedule, but because of the rising costs, it's eroded our prepayment. Just because we do escrow insurance, we escrow taxes, right? A normal escrow account. So because we're paying more in taxes and stuff, our prepayment's gone. So I was looking at it. I need to pay an extra like $400 a month to shave off 3 years off that final term. But aggressively prepaying a 2.5% rate, economically it doesn't make sense. The only way it makes sense is to pay it down so you have no monthly balance when I need that cash flow to go to insurance costs. So that's how I'm approaching it. But what I think I might do is just be prepared to pay off that remaining 60 grand in a lump sum when the time comes, right? Because if I don't prepayment, I can just keep that extra money in the market and keep adding to the market balance. And hopefully that, compounds more. I mean, I should be able to beat 2.5%. I mean, that's crazy. That's what I think about debt. I try to limit the car debt, and then assuming her school continues to work out, we can stay put and get this house paid down. The idea of moving now, it would have to be like a serious life event that would trigger a move. And I think that would be school related. Or it could be job related. I mean, who knows? But, okay. I'm going to do the interior. We're going to call this done. Thanks.